The boy was 11 years old, and he was holding a sandwich like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because, for him, it was. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of morning that couldn't decide if it wanted to be fall or winter. The wind came in sideways down Fifth Avenue, carrying the smell of wet leaves and exhaust, and most people on that sidewalk had their heads down, moving fast, not looking at anything except the next 10 feet of pavement in front of them. Tobias didn't have anywhere to be. That was the thing about Tobias. He always had time to notice. He was slight for his age, with dark eyes that took in more than most adults would be comfortable with, and a jacket 2 sizes too large that had been his uncle's, before his uncle stopped coming around. He'd found the sandwich that morning in the break room of the diner where his mother worked the early shift. The cook had made an extra by accident and told Tobias to take it. Turkey on white, a little mayo, wrapped in wax paper. Tobias had been saving it since 7:30 in the morning, carrying it carefully in both hands, planning to eat it at noon. It was not yet 8 o'clock when he saw the man sitting on the steps of the old Meridian building. The man was wearing a suit. That was the first thing Tobias noticed. Not that the man was crying, though he was, quietly, with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes fixed on nothing. The suit was charcoal gray and looked expensive even from across the sidewalk. His shoes were the kind Tobias had seen in windows on Madison Avenue, the kind with no price tags, because the people who bought them didn't need to ask. The man's briefcase sat beside him on the step, upright and closed like it was waiting for instructions. People walked past him, every single one of them. Tobias stopped. He stood there on the sidewalk for a moment, just watching. The man wasn't making any noise. He wasn't asking for anything. He was just sitting there in his expensive suit, on the cold stone steps, crying in the way that people cry, when they've forgotten that anyone might be watching. Slow tears, methodical almost, like his eyes had simply given up trying to hold them back. Tobias took 3 steps toward him and then stopped again. His mother had told him more than once, "Don't bother people who look like they have money. They don't want your attention." She'd said it the way she said everything practical. Not unkindly, just plainly, the way you tell a child a fact about the world. But something about this man didn't look like he had money right now. Something about him looked exactly like the way Tobias felt the night his mother sat at the kitchen table after her shift and just stared at the electric bill without opening it. "Are you okay?" Tobias asked. The man looked up. His eyes were red. He looked at Tobias the way people sometimes look at a child who's spoken to them unexpectedly, a little startled, a little unsure of the rules. "I'm fine," he said. His voice came out rough, like he'd been using it too much or not enough. Tobias looked at him for another moment. "You don't look fine." The man almost smiled at that. "Almost." "No," he agreed. "I suppose I don't." Tobias sat down on the step beside him, not right next to him, 1 step down, so he was a little lower, which felt right somehow, less intrusive. He held the sandwich in his lap. The man watched him sit down with an expression Tobias couldn't quite read. "My name's Tobias," Tobias said. "Martin," the man said. "What happened?" Martin looked at him. "You always ask strangers what happened." "Only when they're sitting on steps crying in a suit," Tobias said. This time Martin did smile briefly, a small and tired thing. He looked back out at the street. A cab leaned on its horn. A woman with a stroller navigated around a delivery cart. The city just kept moving. "I had a meeting this morning," Martin said slowly. "The most important meeting of the last 6 years of my life." He paused. "I missed it." Tobias waited. "Not because I forgot," Martin said. "Because I sat down on these steps to catch my breath, just for a minute, and I couldn't make myself get up." He said it like he was confessing something, like the words tasted strange. "I don't know what's wrong with me." Tobias considered this seriously. "Were you scared?" he asked. Martin looked at him again, that searching look. "I'm 53 years old," he said. "So?" Martin was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said finally. "I was scared." Tobias nodded like this was the most reasonable thing he'd heard all morning. He looked down at the sandwich in his hands. He thought about it for only a second, and then he held it out. "Here," he said. "I was going to eat this at lunch, but you look like you need it more right now." Martin stared at the sandwich. He stared at it the way you stare at something when you're trying to understand what it means. "That's your lunch," he said. "I know. I can't take your lunch. You're not taking it. I'm giving it to you." Martin didn't say anything for a long moment. Something moved across his face, something complicated and quiet. the way feelings look when they've been buried under a long time of not being allowed out. "Why?" he asked. His voice had changed slightly, less controlled. Tobias shrugged in the way of someone who hasn't yet learned that generosity is supposed to be complicated. "Because you're sitting on steps crying," he said simply, "and it's cold out, and everyone else walked by." Martin took the sandwich. He held it in both hands, still wrapped in its wax paper, and he looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Tobias. "How old are you?" he asked. 11, Martin repeated. He said it like he was measuring something. "Where do you go to school?" "PS 174, on 106th. Martin nodded slowly. "Harlem. That's a long way from here." "My mum works down here," Tobias said, "at Patrice's Diner on 58th. I walk her to work sometimes when school's on break." He paused. "It's a teacher development day." Martin looked at him. "So you walked your mother to work this morning? She doesn't like me to be home alone when the heat's acting up." Martin was quiet. He turned the sandwich over in his hands, once, slowly. "What does your father do?" he asked. Tobias looked at the street. "He doesn't do anything," he said. "He left when I was 4. I don't really remember him." The words were plain, not sad exactly, the plainness of someone who has already processed a thing and found a way to set it down. Martin heard that plainness and it landed somewhere in his chest. "I'm sorry," Martin said. Tobias shrugged again. "It's okay." And then, because Tobias was the kind of person who moved toward things rather than away from them, "Do you have kids?" Something happened to Martin's face. A contraction, very fast, like a door blown shut by wind. "I had a daughter," he said. Tobias heard the tense. "Had?" Martin unwrapped the sandwich slowly. "Her name was Cecile. She'd be 26 now." He stopped. Started again. "She died when she was 9. Leukemia." He said the word the way people say it after years, flat, familiar, terrible in its familiarity. "That was 17 years ago." The sidewalk was loud. A bus groaned past. Someone's phone played 3 bars of a song. "What was she like?" Martin looked at him. Most people, when he mentioned Cecile, changed the subject, or said "I'm so sorry," and looked away. This boy had just asked him what she was like, in the same tone he'd ask what someone's favorite color was. "She was." Martin stopped. He looked out at the street again. "She was relentless," he said. "That's the word. She didn't accept things the way they were. She was always pushing, always asking why. She used to collect lost things, buttons, coins. One time she brought home a single shoe she found in the park, said she was going to find its match." A sound came out of him that was somewhere between a laugh and something else. She never did, but she kept looking. Tobias listened to all of this carefully. "She sounds like someone I'd like," he said. Martin looked at him for a long time. "I think she'd have liked you too," he said quietly. Martin ate the sandwich. Tobias sat beside him and watched the city move. Neither of them spoke for a while, and the silence was the comfortable kind, which was unusual between two people who had met 12 minutes ago. After a while, Martin said, "The meeting I missed. It was with the board of a company I built from nothing. 16 years. He paused. "They're voting today on whether to keep me on as CEO. Tobias thought about this. "You think they're going to vote you out?" "I know they are." Martin said it without bitterness, which somehow made it worse. "I've known for 3 months. He stopped. "You didn't want to go watch it happen," Tobias said. Martin looked at him sharply. Then he let out a long breath. "No," he said. "I didn't." "That makes sense," Tobias said. Martin finished the sandwich. He folded the wax paper carefully as if it mattered and held it in his hand. "You know," he said, "in 16 years of running that company, not one single person ever just sat down next to me and asked if I was okay." He said it slowly, like he was discovering it as he said it. Tobias didn't say anything. "They wanted things from me," Martin continued. "All of them. Contracts, promotions, references. They took me to dinners and played golf and sent Christmas cards. But not—" He stopped. "But not this," Tobias said. "No, not this." The morning had moved forward without them noticing. The sidewalk crowd had thinned slightly as the peak commute hour passed. Martin looked at his watch. A real watch, Tobias noticed, not a phone, and then looked at Tobias. "I should let you go," Martin said. "I'm okay," Tobias said. "I don't have anywhere to be until I pick my mom up at 2. Martin looked at him. Something had settled in his face, not peace exactly, but something adjacent to it. The redness had faded from his eyes. "Let me buy you lunch," he said. "Properly. To replace what you gave me." "You don't have to," Tobias said. "I know I don't have to," Martin said. "I want to." They ended up at a diner 3 blocks away, not Patrice's, a different one, with red vinyl booths and a menu in a laminated sleeve and coffee that came in thick white mugs. Tobias ordered a grilled cheese and a Coke without looking self-conscious about it. Martin ordered the same. They sat across from each other in the booth. "What do you want to be?" Martin asked. "When you're older." Tobias didn't hesitate. "An architect," he said. "I want to build things." Martin looked at him. "Why architecture?" "Because buildings are permanent," Tobias said. "You make something, it stays." He paused. "My mom moves us a lot. We've lived in 5 different places since I was born. I always think about what it would be like to build something that didn't go anywhere." Martin was quiet for a moment. "Where do you live now?" "Washington Heights. We've been there 2 years. That's the longest." Tobias said it without complaint. "Our building's okay. The radiator makes noise, but it mostly works. Your mother works at the diner full-time." "She works there, and she also does alterations on weekends for this lady on Dykeman Street. She's really good at sewing." Tobias said it with uncomplicated pride. "She made my Halloween costume last year. I was an astronaut. She made the whole thing from scratch." Martin watched him. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She is," Tobias said, simply, completely, without thinking about it. The food came. They ate. At some point, somewhere in the middle of the grilled cheese and a conversation that had wandered from architecture to whether hot dogs counted as sandwiches, Tobias said no, definitively. Martin found himself laughing. A real laugh, unguarded, the kind he hadn't produced in longer than he could immediately remember. He stopped, registered it, laughed again at the fact that he'd noticed. Tobias watched him with those dark, serious eyes and then smiled, and it transformed his whole face. When they were done, Martin paid the check. He also left a tip that made the waitress blink. Then he sat for a moment with his coffee, not ready to go. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure," Tobias said. "Why did you sit down this morning?" "You didn't know me. Most people walked past." Tobias thought about it. "My mom always says, you can't help everyone. She says it because she wishes she could." He looked at his Coke. "But she also says when someone is right in front of you, that's different. That's not everyone. That's just this person right here, right now." Martin was quiet. "And you were right in front of me," Tobias said. Martin looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and took out a business card. He held it out across the table. "I want you to keep this," he said. Tobias took it. Martin Ellery, Ellery Capital Group. The card was heavy, cream-colored, the kind of card that meant something. "If you ever need anything," Martin said. "Anything at all. For school, for whatever you need, I want you to call that number." Tobias looked at the card. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Martin said. "I'm doing it anyway." Tobias put the card in his jacket pocket, in the place where the sandwich had been. They walked out onto the street together. The morning had fully become afternoon. The sun was doing its best through the clouds. "Are you going to go to your meeting?" Tobias asked. Martin looked down at him. He considered the question seriously. "It's too late for the meeting," he said, "but I think I'm going to go to the office." A pause. "There are things that need to be dealt with. Whatever happens." He said it like someone who had just been reminded that things need to be dealt with and that this is, in fact, okay. "Good," Tobias said. Martin held out his hand. Tobias shook it, seriously, like an adult, which made Martin's throat tighten slightly. "Thank you, Tobias," he said, "for the sandwich. You can thank me by not sitting on cold steps again," Tobias said. Martin laughed. "Deal." He watched the boy walk away down the sidewalk, hands in the pockets of his too large jacket, unhurried, observing. Tobias didn't look back. He just kept walking, turned a corner, and was gone. Martin stood there for a moment on the sidewalk. Then he picked up his briefcase, straightened his jacket, and started walking toward the office. 3 weeks passed. Tobias didn't call the number on the card. He put the card in the small wooden box under his bed, where he kept things that mattered. A photograph of his grandmother, a shark tooth he'd found at Coney Island, a birthday card his mother had written him 3 years ago that he still read sometimes. The Ellery Capital card went in there with the rest. He didn't tell his mother about Martin right away, not because he was hiding it. Tobias wasn't much for hiding things, but because it felt like something to hold quietly for a while, the way you hold something warm in both hands before you set it down. He did tell his mother eventually, on a Sunday night in November, when they were eating soup at the kitchen table, and the radiator was making its clanging sound that they'd both stopped hearing. His mother, her name was Gloria, and she had Tobias's same dark eyes and a tiredness in her face that she carried the way some people carry grace. Listened to the whole story without interrupting. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. "You gave him your sandwich," she said. "He looked like he needed it," Tobias said. Gloria looked at her son. Something moved in her face briefly before she put it away. "Okay," she said, and then, "Did you eat enough that day?" "He bought me lunch," Tobias said. "A grilled cheese and a Coke." "Okay," Gloria said again. She picked up her spoon, set it down, picked it up again. "You're a good boy, Tobias," she said quietly. "You always say that," Tobias said. "Because it's always true," she said. Martin Ellery, as it turned out, was voted out of Ellery Capital Group on that Tuesday morning in October. The vote was 7-2. By the time he arrived at the office, it was done. What happened afterward was a matter of considerable discussion in certain circles. Finance blogs, business columns, the kind of places where people tracked these things. What was reported was that Martin Ellery, who had built Ellery Capital from a two-person operation in a midtown sublet into a firm managing $11 billion in assets, had walked into the office after the vote, shaken hands with every single person he passed in the hallway, cleaned out his desk methodically and without visible emotion, and then gone into the empty conference room and stayed there alone for 45 minutes. What nobody reported, because nobody knew, was what he did during those 45 minutes. He sat in the conference room and thought about a boy with dark eyes sitting one step below him on the steps of the Meridian building, holding out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. Because you're sitting on steps crying, and it's cold out, and everyone else walked by. He thought about that. After 45 minutes, he came out of the conference room. He went to his assistant's desk, his former assistant, he supposed, now, and asked her if she had a piece of paper. She gave him a legal pad. He sat at an empty desk in the corner of the bullpen, which was strange, to sit at an empty desk in an office he'd owned for 16 years, but he did it anyway, and he started writing. Not a business plan, not a letter to his lawyers. He wrote a list, and the list was titled, in his own handwriting, "Things I Should Have Done Differently." Not the company, not the vote. The things before all of that, the things further back, the things that had to do with his daughter, and a marriage that had come apart 3 years after Cecile died, and a decade of deciding that work was the only thing left that made sense. He filled 4 pages. Then he stopped, looked at what he'd written, and folded the pages into his jacket pocket. Then he called his ex-wife. He'd spoken to her perhaps 6 times in 11 years. Her name was Dorothea, and she picked up on the 4th ring, and the sound of her voice was strange and familiar in equal measure. "Martin," she said cautiously. "I was voted out this morning," he said. A pause. "I heard. I'm not calling about that." He stopped. Started again. "I'm calling because I met a boy today, 11 years old. And he sat next to me and talked to me for 3 hours, and I haven't talked to anyone like that in a long time, Dorothea. I haven't." He stopped again. "Martin," she said more gently. I think I've been underwater for a long time," he said, "and I didn't know it. And I just thought." His voice was doing something he couldn't quite control. "I thought I should call you. I don't know what I expected you to say. I just thought I should call." There was a long silence. "Are you all right?" Dorothea said. "No," Martin said, "but I think I might be eventually." Another silence, different from the first. "There's a grief counselor I've been seeing," Dorothea said slowly. She's been good for me. I could give you her number." "Okay," Martin said. A pause. "I'm glad you called." He didn't say anything for a moment. "Thank you," he said, "for picking up." In the first week of December, a letter arrived at PS 174, addressed to the principal and marked for the attention of the school counselor. Inside was a check, a considerable one, the kind that makes a school counselor pick up the phone immediately, and a handwritten note that said, "This is for your scholarship fund, specifically for students interested in architecture, engineering, or design. No restrictions. Use it as you see fit. M. Ellery." There was a second envelope inside, sealed, with Tobias written on it in the same handwriting. Inside that envelope was a single card. On the front, a photograph of a building Martin had admired for years, the TWA Flight Center at JFK, Aero Saarinen's curved, wing-like structure, all swooping concrete and controlled motion, a building that looked like it had been caught in the act of becoming something. On the back, Martin had written, "This building was finished in 1962. Saarinen died before he saw it completed. He believed in it anyway. So do I, in buildings and in the people who want to build them. Keep going, Tobias." Tobias read the card twice, standing in the hallway outside the counselor's office while his teacher waited. Then he put it in his jacket pocket. He would put it in the wooden box when he got home, next to the card with the phone number, next to the photograph of his grandmother, next to the shark tooth and the birthday letter. But for now, he just kept it in his pocket, close, like something warm he wasn't ready to set down. 4 months after that cold October morning, in the early spring, Martin Ellery began quietly establishing a new firm. Smaller, different in focus, aimed at funding infrastructure in underserved neighborhoods. He consulted a different kind of person than he'd consulted in his previous life. He sat in community meetings in Washington Heights and the South Bronx and Crown Heights, listening more than he talked, which was new for him. His therapist, he'd started seeing someone in November, not Dorothea's counselor, but someone else, a man named Dr. Abrams, who had an office in a brownstone on the Upper West Side, and a habit of asking questions that had no comfortable answers, said to him once, "You described that morning in October as a turning point." What turned? Martin thought about it. "I think I was reminded," he said finally, "that it's possible for someone to see you. Just see you. Not what you've built, not your name, not your number. Just you, sitting on some steps." He paused. "I'd forgotten that was possible. What does it feel like, to remember it?" Dr. Abrams asked. Martin considered the question seriously, in the way he'd started to learn from a boy on a sidewalk in October. "Like something opening," he said. "I know how it sounds. But that's the only way I can describe it. Like a window that had been painted shut for years, and someone just..." He stopped, smiled slightly. Someone just pushed it open. Tobias turned 12 in March. His mother made him a cake with blue frosting because blue was his favorite color. And they ate it at the kitchen table while the radiator banged cheerfully, and the sounds of Washington Heights came through the window. Horns, music, the particular rhythm of the neighborhood settling into a Friday night. His mother watched him blow out the candles. "What did you wish for?" she asked. Tobias thought about it. "I wish that things stay the way they are right now," he said. "For a while." Gloria looked at him. "That's a pretty quiet wish for a 12-year-old, she said. "It's a pretty good right now," Tobias said. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. Outside the window, the city kept going, enormous and indifferent and full, as it always was, of people on steps and people walking past and the occasional person who stops, sits down and asks, "Are you okay?" The radiator banged. The candles smoked. The night came in warm through the window, and for a little while, nothing needed to be anything other than exactly what it was.